Up next, we're talking all about sustainability at Volvo, how committed this automaker is to going green. We'll learn what a battery passport is, and we'll find out whether biofuels are a viable solution going forward. So stick around for all of that and a whole lot more right here on GreenCars, the podcast. Are you ready to explore the wonderful world of sustainable transportation? If so, you are in the right place. I'm automotive journalist Craig Cole, and I'm joined by Sam Abuelsamid. He's my co-host here on GreenCars, the podcast, and he's the vice president of market research at Telemetry. And Sam, it's great to see you again.
It's good to see you too, Craig. It's been a wonderful couple of days here, and looking forward to this conversation with Vanessa Butani.
Yeah, so she's the head of global sustainability at Volvo, which is a Swedish/Chinese automaker. How would you characterize it these days?
Yeah, I mean, it's technically a Swedish company. It happens to be owned, and it's publicly traded again. But it's, the majority of the shares are owned by Geely Group from China. And just to be clear, we are talking about Volvo Cars here, which is there's another company called Volvo Group, which makes trucks and buses and marine engines and stuff like that. And they used to be the same company back until the early 90s, or actually maybe late 80s, when they split. And so Volvo Group is the truck and bus company. Volvo Cars is the company that we're talking about today.
Yeah, it's a little more relevant to consumers, I think.
Yeah.
Not many folks are going to get a giant marine diesel or an over-the-road truck, right?
Probably not. Although, a lot of the stuff that we buy every day is delivered by Volvo built trucks.
This is very true. Hugely important for logistics and all of that. But Volvo is really aiming to go green, and not necessarily just with its vehicles. They're looking much more at the whole process of building cars to take carbon out and to improve recyclability. So this should be a really great discussion today. What are you hoping to learn, though, Sam, from Vanessa?
As you said, it's about more than just the cars. It's about the entire business of how you decarbonize an industry. Because there's a lot of emissions that go into not just what comes out of the tailpipe, but into actually manufacturing, getting the materials, and then what you do with the vehicle at the end of its life. And Volvo is looking at all of those aspects of sustainability, trying to reduce the overall carbon footprint of everything that they produce.
Yeah, I also want to ask about e-fuels, which of course is Porsche's name for synthetic gasoline, but e-fuels as well as biofuels to see if maybe those are a viable option to improve sustainability going forward. But before we get to our interview with Vanessa, just a quick reminder to visit greencars.com, where we have expert reviews, there's a helpful buyer's guide, we have an EV matchmaker, and much, much more. Again, that's greencars.com, your hub for sustainable motoring. And if you want to be more environmentally friendly, you would be wise to drive a Volvo. And I'm sure today's guest will agree. So welcome to the show, Vanessa. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to be here.
So tell us about sustainability at Volvo and how you got involved in all of this.
Ooh, good question. Yeah, I've been working in sustainability for a long time. I really saw the opportunity to create a sustainable future and a better business case for a business. So that was really important for me to be able to create a competitive advantage and work to that by integrating sustainability in everything that we do. So this started for me many years ago when I was working in consulting. I also worked at Electrolux Group with appliances, where we really were pushing the envelope on sustainability and really trying to reach our consumers, where I see that's where we can make a big change. And then ultimately I ended up at Volvo Cars, which was a super exciting opportunity for me to be able to take that next step, to be able to work in electrifying transportation in an industry that is super dynamic, very much in the heat of the moment, and challenging, but a good challenge in that sense.
So when you arrived at Volvo Car, how did you find the company's approach to sustainability at that point in time?
What really impressed me was the great strides that Volvo Cars has taken to really be a leader in sustainability. Again, seeing the opportunity that that gives us, and really seeing the value in what we can do, even though it's not that easy. What's really exciting for me is every time I meet my colleagues, the ambition that we have, the desire that we have to make a change, to really make an impact, knowing that we can't do everything we want to do all the time. It's not easy, but there's always like a can-do attitude. Okay, what can we do this time? What could we do more next time? That kind of thing. And that's really motivating, right? When you don't feel like it's just banging on closed doors.
So when you start talking about sustainability, especially in a manufacturing firm like Volvo Car, it's about much more than just the end product itself, how sustainable the car is. It's about the entire value chain, going from raw materials to delivering the product to customers, and also even at the end of life of the product. So what have been some of the big efforts that have been made towards improving the sustainability of Volvo Cars over the years?
Yeah. And you're totally right, right? I mean, it is about electrifying, but it's also about so much more. So, I mean, the big step that we need to take is electrify the fleet, right? Because even according to the United Nations, the biggest impact that the transportation sector can have on decarbonization is to go electric. So that's, we're all in electric. We're aiming to be an all electric company by at least 2040 and 90% electrified already 2030. So that's a big step. Then we need to look at all the materials, like how do we build our cars, right? And that's steel, that's aluminum, that's plastic. And how do we make that transition away from the way we work with those materials today to look at these materials and how can we make them more circular? How can we reuse what we use, reuse our own waste, and also help to then lower our costs and make ourselves a more resilient company if we can sort of be a little bit more self-suppliant, or at least throughout working with our partners and through our value chain. But for sure, it's about even more than that, right? And it's about being a responsible business and taking responsibility all the way up our value chain, right? So as we work to electrify, we know that comes with challenges in the battery supply chain, right? And a lot of the impact comes higher up than in the supply chain with how we work with our suppliers, with their suppliers, all the way back to the mines. And that's where we've really done a lot of good work to try to map out our supply chains. For example, we are the first automotive company to produce a battery passport that came first with our EX90, so our big flagship SUV. That is really cool, actually, because if there's a QR code, like you open the car door, there's a QR code on the inside of the car, you can scan that, and then you get all kinds of information about your battery, both like battery health, the status, all kinds of information also then about key materials in the battery and where they come from, the recyclability, how recycle, or what level of recycled content you have that. And really with that, we're trying to be extremely transparent to allow the owner of that car to see, where does this battery come from? What have we done? And, where is all of this? But also so that we can trace it back and we can be working with our suppliers to be more responsible. Of course, we have to look at our own house as well. Right. So, I mean, now we have 7 out of our 9 plants that are climate neutral, and we're continually working to make those better as well. So it's really about taking a holistic approach and making sure that we address all the parts of the value chain and all the parts of constructing our cars.
How do you do that, Vanessa? Because vehicle manufacturing is heavy industry, and as far as I know, that's extremely dirty, at least historically. How do you make your plants carbon neutral?
So working to make the plants carbon neutral, I think that there's a few levers that you can use, right? And obviously the first thing, debatably the easiest thing, but is to reduce the energy usage overall, right? And I mean, when we have a global footprint, we have good things happening in all parts of the world. So something that we do here to reduce energy usage, we can apply there and we can apply there, right? So first we need to do that. And then it's looking, okay, how are we sourcing this energy? Which partners do we have there? And how can we try to make that shift over time and make a roadmap to where we want to get to. So it's hard work. And it's constant discussions. But again, it comes back to this is what we want to do and we all believe in that. So we're on our way. Are we always getting exactly what we want? No, but we're making good progress. And I think that's really the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, that idea of, looking at everything within the scope of manufacturing to see where you can improve efficiency, like, the building itself, improving the insulation on the building, so you don't have as much heating and cooling costs at different times
Exactly.
of the year. All those things add up. I want to go back to the battery passport thing for a second. One of the complaints people have had about EVs is the energy required to manufacture a battery. And certainly up to this point, the carbon output of manufacturing an electric vehicle has been higher than for an internal combustion vehicle. Although once it's in service, then that drops down much lower, and your net energy use over the life of the vehicle is lower. So what sorts of things are you tracking with that battery passport, and how can customers utilize that? How does that benefit the customers to understand that information?
I think that's a great question, because that's exactly what we're trying to do with the passport, right? Making it so easily accessible is allowing people to take a look and start asking questions. And I think that's the best thing you can do, is start asking questions, right? And I mean, no, the battery passport doesn't cover everything, but it's our first attempt to really try to get more information in there. And that comes with every single electric vehicle that we produce now. They will all have that battery passport, right? So as I said, it started with the EX90. The other thing that we do, and actually we've been doing that for a lot longer, is publishing carbon footprint reports with our electric vehicles as well. Right. So that looks at the entire scope and compares that vehicle. So say it is an EX60 now, would compare that with other models and show you, like in this example, right, the EX60, which is the most recent SUV that we launched in January, that has the lowest carbon footprint of any of our cars to date, matching that of the EX30, which is a much smaller vehicle, right? So pushing ourselves to make progress all the time, but really trying to publish those reports so you can follow the progress all the time. And reducing the emissions related to the batteries is also a top priority for us. Like I said, right, going electric is great, and then we need to start looking at the other parts that are left then to address, being materials, being batteries, those kinds of things, right? So one thing that we're trying to do is make sure that we also have much more recycled content in the actual batteries themselves. We have more efficient manufacturing, fossil-free energy in the cell production. So here again with the EX60, which is really the car that we are taking a huge step forward when it comes to sustainability. And we like to say, this car has so much sustainability wrapped into it, but you're not making any compromise on safety, on quality, or on that fantastic feeling of driving an electric Volvo, right? But you get these sustainability benefits kind of as a bonus on the side. So that has 30% recycled content in the cathode material, copper in the anode foil, aluminum in the cell enclosure, and 45% recycled aluminum in the battery pack enclosure. And all of this you get then with 15% faster charging and 40% less carbon footprint for the battery cells compared to the previous generation. So it's not just about switching to a battery now, right? And then getting going for a BEV. We've got to work to make those even better. And we're really trying to do that as well and push ourselves.
So there's no magic bullet solution here. It's a bunch of very small optimizations, right? Because I remember with the EX30, when that came out, you guys only put one display in the car, because adding a separate instrument cluster is another screen, and the carbon emissions associated with creating that screen and installing it in the car were so big, shockingly so, right, that it made a lot of sense to just consolidate to one panel.
And I think with what I really like also actually about Volvo Cars is our willingness to try things, right? And to do different things. So the EX30 was another way of approaching a different customer group than we'd perhaps been doing before, and trying new ways of reaching those people. And like you said, showing really a sustainable product and how that could be. And so there's tons of lessons learned from that. And we really need to listen to our consumers as well to understand what is it that drives value for them. And I think a big thing that we see is, right, we want a premium experience as a Volvo driver, right? We have a high expectation on what we expect from Volvo Cars, right? To be that sustainable company, to be the company that we have known and trusted for almost 100 years, right? So we as Volvo Cars have to match this. How do we give that premium experience by also delivering on the sustainability story, and in a way that really excites consumers and brings them closer to us, right? And I think we're making strides on that every time.
So there have obviously been some struggles in recent years with the shift towards electrification of transportation, for a variety of reasons. But what are some of the biggest challenges that Volvo and your suppliers have overcome particularly on the battery production side. You mentioned, the recyclability of the materials, using a lot of recycled materials in the batteries. But what are some of the other areas where you've made progress as well in terms of reducing the overall carbon footprint of the battery?
That's a good question. I mean, looking overall, it's again taking this holistic perspective on the electric vehicle and the battery, right? So it's everything from how are we pushing to make the batteries better, and we see. I mean, we've been making leaps and bounds in terms of extending the range on the battery, making them be faster to charge, and all of that while making those batteries lighter weight. Like I said, more recycled content and just better production overall. And then it's all the other aspects that come together, right? In terms of the production that we have, how we treat the people throughout, our own people as well as the people throughout the value chain. So it's all these little things coming together, right? But always having the ambition really high. So every car program we have, we set a new target and say, this is where we need to get to on this one, and hopefully we can make the next one even better, right? And it challenges the teams for sure, right? But we have to work together to make it happen. And again, I come back to it. That's the ambition that we have.
Sam, to a point you mentioned earlier, there are so many emissions associated with manufacturing, lithium-ion batteries, particularly for vehicles. You may mine materials in South America or Australia. You send them to China to be refined. They might get sent, to Europe to be installed in a battery cell, and then that cell gets sent to another factory to be put in the car ultimately. So there's a lot of emissions along that chain. Is there any way that you guys are bringing that more in-house? Is there any way you can do that at Volvo?
I think a nice example I have is how we can address that through partnerships and collaborations, right? So, so in the EX60, again, I take that because it's our most recent car and we've done so much good stuff in that, right? But we have a great partnership with our steel supplier, SSAB, which is a Swedish steel company, right? And we have managed to close the loop with them on steel. So basically, steel that is left over from our production goes back to SSAB. They put it back into their production, and then ultimately it will come back to us, right? So it gets mixed in, and it's not one-to-one exactly, but it's a great way of working because, for one, it helps us maintain our quality, right? So we know the grade of that steel, we know the quality level of that steel, and when we hand it back to SSAB, they can then take care of that and make sure we get the same quality back. And it helps really to close that loop and make sure we get much more recycled content for a much better CO2 level in that steel. So, 70% less processing energy required, and the steel itself will have like 90% less emissions compared to virgin steel. But interesting with that is also then, because it is, we're here in Gothenburg, they're also based in Sweden, that process can be much more local, right? And that can help us to reduce our emissions from all the different transports that you need to make, but we even reduce those steps that are in the process anyways. So I really like that example because it's really showing that we couldn't do that ourselves, but working together with them, finding a partner that wants to do the same kind of thing, testing things. Of course, we've had a long relationship with them. So we've got to be able to push each other, to challenge each other as well. But when we do that, we can get great results. So we're really trying to see where else can we do that kind of thing to address, again, all kinds of parts of the chain.
Mm-hmm. So, obviously your Volvo Cars is headquartered in Sweden. That's where your main manufacturing is, but you've also got operations in other parts of Europe, China, in the US. How much progress have you made on localizing production of as many components and materials as possible to achieve that kind of goal of reducing the overall carbon footprint of the value chain?
Yeah, exactly. So our strategy is more regional, right? So we're trying to make our production is fairly regional. We have, like you said, production all over the world, and trying to tie suppliers closer to the production so that exactly part of that. Of course, if we reduce or if we make it, have our suppliers closer to us, then, both we can get material faster, but the distances are so much closer, and then we can be much more flexible also in terms of what kinds of transportation we use. It's when we get into these crunches where all of a sudden you need to sort of fly something in from somewhere else, that's where you really get the emissions. But you could say, fortunately, that's where also the cost increases. So there's definitely incentive to not do that kind of transport. Of course, we can't make it happen everywhere, right? But we are seeing advantages when we then now, for example, with the EX30, we've localized that production also in Belgium. So that brings that closer to Europe. Means that the transports both into the plant, but then out when it needs to get to the various countries in Europe, become that much closer and that much easier to control.
She mentioned flying parts in and out. What was it, Sam? The Cadillac Alante? They called it the airlift or something. They would build the bodies in like Italy and then load them on a 747, fly them back to Detroit.
They had a fleet of 3 modified 747s that they used to transport finished bodies from a plant in Italy to a final assembly plant in Detroit to build the Alante back in the late 80s and early 90s.
Okay. I hope they've rethought that production.
No plans for Volvo to do the same? You're not get a
no,
couple
actually, what we've
A380s?
done, no. Actually, we're going the other way, right? So look, again, at the EX60, what we've done there is really reduce transportation by mega casting one big part in the EX60, right? So the whole back part of the EX60 is mega casted. That means that we had, hundreds of parts that have now been made into one part instead. And why is that good? Well, for one, we can do it here on site, and then it can go straight into the car. We can put tons of recycled aluminum into that part, which is super. But also before, when we had all these little parts coming together, they had to come from all over the place, right? And then you can imagine all the transports, logistics, all the planning to get that all ready into the right place. Now, we mega cast that here. It's one piece. You take out all that complexity behind. So it's good for so many reasons as well that we can do the mega casting in the X60.
Does sustainability, does that cost customers more or does it save them? I know it's good for the planet, obviously, good for the air quality, myriad benefits, but on the monetary side, does it lower the vehicle cost at all?
I think one thing you can look at right now is the advantage of driving an electric vehicle when you're not going to the gas station, however many times a week you do
Especially
that. So,
today.
Yes.
Exactly. I was just speaking to a friend of mine on the weekend who just bought a XC90 plug-in hybrid, and she was raving because she said, we're saving so much money because every day when we just drive around the city, we're driving electric and then we charge it at night. So that's fantastic. But in general, we see, consumers won't pay more for sustainability, right? It's kind of like I was saying at the beginning. We expect this from Volvo Cars. We expect this value, and that is why we buy into Volvo Cars. However, what we can do is show you how this actually can be a benefit for you, right? And having that, the electric experience is fantastic. So really encourage people to try an electric car and see what it feels like. Try a plug-in hybrid and drive on the electric part of it. What we see now, what we're doing again with the EX60 is we're able to offer this fantastic package at a price parity. So at a comparable price to an equivalent vehicle with an internal combustion engine. And that's when we really start to change the game, right? When we can do that, we see there isn't that excuse anymore. And on top of that, if you look at the total cost of ownership, right? As I was saying, the daily costs are great, but also with electric vehicles, right? There's less maintenance costs. The insurance as well. We're working with insurance companies to see also we're doing battery refurbishment as well, so that you can have a refurbished battery into your product, which will also help to keep the prices down, but also keeping the quality of that battery going. So we need to look at the full story. But I think really what I see as my challenge every day is making sustainability exciting, desirable to our consumers. And we're getting there.
Speaking of battery refurbishment and recycling, what has Volvo done in terms of at the end of life of a vehicle, after 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 kilometers of use of the vehicle, the battery often still has a lot of useful life in it for other applications. Is Volvo looking at partnerships with, for example, companies that might be putting them into energy storage solutions, or even how the logistics of taking batteries from end of life vehicles and getting them to recycling facilities.
So that is a super important area, looking at how we can take care of the batteries at the end of life. And exactly as you said, we need to get on top of that even more. So we have, as I said, refurbishment that's happening in Europe, where we are taking back old batteries, fixing them up, primarily to put back into cars, actually. So at this point, not looking at how we can use them for storage. But there's certainly ideas on that going forward. And I see that is also part of this circular closing the loop that we need to do. So there's much more legislation also coming on end-of-life vehicles that we need to get on top of. But we see this is really a great opportunity, right? Because even more working with the materials in general in the car, but also getting back that battery, we can again help to become a more resilient company, being able to use the materials that we get back so that we're not so sensitive to price fluctuations on the raw material markets, but also using the batteries in a better way. So certainly something we're looking at as well.
You mentioned a moment ago, Vanessa, plug-in hybrids. They're a fantastic solution, a great middle ground between the combustion past and the all-electric future, as long as drivers are plugging them in. I know a lot of folks, at least in the U.S. here, seem to forget that that's even a feature. But obviously with a plug-in, you still have a combustion engine. What is the status of, is it something Volvo's looking into? E-fuels, which is something Porsche is working on, sort of a synthetic gasoline. Also biofuels. Is that something on Volvo's radar?
So we see that, for us, the plug-in hybrids are really a bridge to the future, right? We see that, different markets are moving at different speeds to go electric. It is the future. That's where we're ending up. But we need that bridge for a while to help people get there. And I think, as I said as well, getting into a plug-in hybrid, then you start to feel, what is it like? You can distinctly feel when you switch from driving electric to moving over to the combustion engine, right? E-fuels could offer an alternative to conventional fuels with cars, but we don't see that's really the sustainable future. Like, we see that we really need to go electric. So that's what we're really pushing for. And I think our consumers are with us on that too.
So, given that combustion engines are going to be with us a little bit longer than many thought 3, 4, 5 years ago, what else can be done to improve the sustainability of those vehicles over the next decade or so?
I mean, energy efficiency in those vehicles is going to continue to be pushed, right? So we will all have to continue on that. But again, the material topic, right? The steel, the aluminum, the plastics, all the recycling, like again, closing those loops, that can be done no matter what. And there is value in the car, regardless of whether it has a battery or not, right? And regardless if that is an end-of-life vehicle, so 20 plus years old or something that is more has a shorter life on it for the parts value, but also just the raw material value in the end. So I think that's where we really need to put our efforts. And again, it's going to be regional, right? And we need to make sure that we're building up those good ecosystem. So it's not just us, right? It's working with the local municipalities, because it becomes quite local. Also working with other partners in the value chain, the recyclers, the collectors, to make sure that we can get that material back, keep the grades that we need as well, because that's a problem we have, that you can downgrade so much when you're recycling, and then it's not the grade that we need, it's not the quality that we need, and then we can't use it, right? So that's where I think the big opportunity is, and that is something that even is outside of the automotive industry, like that we are working with other partners, sort of not downstream in the value chain, but other like-minded producers of other types of products, that we all see, I need this kind of material, they need that kind of material. How can we get together and bring those demands forward to the recyclers as well? So there's super opportunities there.
Yeah. To your point, Sam, combustion engines, they're not going anywhere anytime soon, for better or worse. But what's remarkable, you're lucky to get to 40% efficiency with a gasoline engine, right? Whereas an electric motor is effortlessly 90+%. Don't quote me on those numbers, but it's somewhere in that range, which just underscores how much cleaner the EVs are than your gas-powered counterparts. a staggering difference.
Yeah. So other materials, you mentioned the EX30 before, which has some interesting material choices inside there. I actually really like that car. But also you've also done a lot of other interesting things in some of the other products, like the wool blend seat coverings on a lot of the vehicles, which I think they look great. They feel really good, and it's an alternative to either animal hides or synthetic leather type materials. What else is Volvo looking at in terms of materials, to again improve the overall sustainability of the product?
Sure. So, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the wool, because the wool we used, I mean, it's responsibly sourced, it's a premium upholstery, and that really, I think, captures sort of the Scandinavian spirit and elegance of Volvo Cars. So we really like that material as well, and see that we can offer, comfort, durability, and again, a great premium kind of experience for the consumers. Here, when it comes to the materials in general and things that you see, we really need to work with our suppliers to help us with this, right? So we know that we need to find materials. We need to find more renewable materials that we can also talk about the origin of those materials that give them a premium feel that we can use with our consumers, right? So for plastic, it means using more, for example, bio-based plastics, making sure wool textiles are responsibly sourced, and also making sure that we design the components so that we can take things apart better and recycle them and again, get the flows back, which I've talked about a lot today.
Yeah.
But plastics are really good, right? Because they're so useful. They can be used in so many ways. We've been since 2018 using ocean plastics in the cars as well in some areas. But overall, we're trying to also streamline the grades of plastic that we use to keep that more simplified, right? And then again, it can be recycled more easily, can be taken apart more easily, and we can use it again more easily. But materials is really an exciting area because there's so much that we can do. And it's both the parts that are consumer facing or not consumer facing. And the exciting bit with the consumer facing part is how do you convey that? How do you convey the fact that it is a premium piece, but also, look, this is a sustainable piece. It is either renewable or it is recycled without making it look like you're making a compromise. And we can see, consumers like those kinds of things, and we dare to test it. So we will, and we'll course correct along the way. But we need to do that to find the right way.
Tell me really quick about the ocean plastic. You guys are just, obviously a lot of waste ends up in the ocean. So you're taking that out, and how do you use that? Because I imagine it's a jumbled mess of different grades of plastics and things like that. How do you make that work?
Yeah, and it's I mean what I said from the beginning, right? We have to be so careful with where we use these plastics and really the testing and ensuring the quality. So it's in specific pieces of the cars where we can use that kind of plastic, where either it's really something that can make a statement in the car, or where it fits in the quality requirements of the cars. So something we would explore more for sure. But there's all the different levels of recycled material and how we can use those in a good way to, again, always maintain the quality, always maintain the premium feel in the car.
Because you might not use that recycled plastic on a dashboard or a center console, but an electrical connector, a wiring loom under the seat, or something that the customer is not going to ever see might be the perfect place for something like that.
I mean, frankly, consumers don't really want to see it, right? They don't want to know necessarily that this is recycled plastic or these are recycled jeans right here. Because it doesn't always bring that premium feel. And it's very different across different regions of the world, right? So it's more that you want the idea of knowing that this car is super, there is recycled material in here, but you don't need to point out to me that the seat that I'm sitting on is recycled material, because that doesn't really give the right feel. So we, again, just need to keep trying things and seeing where we can get to where we want to get to. And again, it really comes down to working with the suppliers and working with our design teams. How do we make it so that it feels really premium? And it's exciting.
Yeah. Well, fascinating discussion, guys. You folks are doing some amazing work at Volvo in the sustainability field. But before we let you go, Vanessa, we've got another segment. It's called 3 for the Road. And basically, we provide a quick tip or a trick to help drivers go green. And today's question is hopefully fairly simple. I don't want to put you on the spot, but what is something a normal person can do to choose a vehicle that is more sustainable? Other than buying a Volvo, of course.
Oh, you stole my tip.
Yeah, right.
No, I would say, I mean, test drive an electric vehicle. It doesn't hurt, right? Go and test drive any electric vehicle and just get that feeling, see how fun it is. And then talk to your neighbor, and maybe they have one, or maybe your friend has a plug-in hybrid, and just bring it up at your dinner table, or when you're out with your friends. Like, what are they thinking? Because you'd be surprised also the myths people have in their heads, but also things that people discover when all of a sudden they try an electric vehicle and they feel that awesome feeling of driving it.
That's a great one. Yeah, last summer, my wife finally decided she wanted to replace our previous car, and decided she wanted to get an EV. And the timing has worked out perfectly. You know, now having an EV now as fuel prices are going up, and she loves driving that car. It's a fantastic car. So what I would say is slow down just a little bit. Yeah, we don't need to be driving 85, 90 miles an hour all the time.
True.
Just slow it down a little bit, because the aerodynamic drag of a car increases exponentially with your speed. You know, so going from 70 to 75 miles an hour, and then to 80 and 85, your drag goes way up really quickly, and it does have a significant impact on either on your electric range or on your fuel economy if you're driving a combustion vehicle. So just slow down a few miles an hour. You'll still get there.
And I have to say, from Volvo Cars, from a safety perspective, it's usually better to slow down a little bit too.
Definitely.
Yes, very true.
Sam is the only fan of the 55 mile per hour limit, apparently.
I wouldn't go that far.
I kid.
Still an enthusiast.
Yeah. My going green tip would be realistic about the size of vehicle that you need. I see so many folks in the U.S., and I don't know if this is the case in Europe, where people are buying much larger vehicles than they necessarily need. But we have so many people that commute to work in full-size trucks, for instance. And yes, it's great to have a pickup truck for hauling mulch on the weekends, or you can throw your bikes in the back and go on vacation, whatever. But for day-to-day use, most folks probably don't need that capability. So I would suggest people just be realistic about their needs when it's time to shop for a new vehicle. If you go and get an Accord hybrid, for instance, which is probably what most drivers could get away with these days, you'll be way more efficient and spending a lot less on fuel than you would if you got another full-size truck. But that's my tip to help you guys be more sustainable. But Vanessa Butani, head of global sustainability at Volvo, thank you so much for your time. This was a fascinating discussion.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Vanessa.
All right, Sam. So what did we learn today?
I think it was a fascinating conversation. And I think one of the key things that was reinforced is that despite the challenges that the industry's had with selling EVs in recent years, Volvo has remained very much committed to sustainability, and sustainability goes way beyond just the vehicle itself. How efficient the end vehicle is, the end product that the customer gets, but it's also about the entire production process, the engineering process, everything about the vehicle, and also the afterlife of the vehicle, being able to recover materials from a vehicle when it does reach the end of its life and recycle those and reuse those products.
Mm-hmm. Sustainability is more than just the fuel economy or the efficiency of an electric vehicle in the end user's hands. It's the whole life cycle, which is what Volvo, I think, is really priding itself on considering. I don't hear a lot of that from other OEMs.
No, we don't hear that talked about very much. Well, for a number of reasons, particularly here in North America, we don't hear manufacturers necessarily talking about that loudly, and a lot of that is for political reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But behind the scenes, you do still hear at least from many manufacturers, companies like Toyota, even Ford and General Motors, Honda, they are still very much committed to being more efficient as much as they can. even if they are struggling to sell electric vehicles.
Exactly. We also talked about the battery passport, which is something I was not aware of, but it's kind of a fascinating idea where you can scan that QR code and learn more about the battery pack and everything. She didn't say if you get stamps in the passport, though. I don't know.
I think that comes when you take it in for service. You know,
Yes.
they pull the battery down, stamp the top of the battery case. No, I have heard about the battery passport before. It's an interesting concept that's been proposed, and I think Volvo is the first manufacturer to adopt it. But it's something that they're broadly trying to get adopted across the industry to be able to track the history of every battery pack from its production through its end of life.
Mm-hmm. We also talked about very briefly e-fuels and biofuels, which doesn't sound like it's really on Volvo's radar. We've got millions and millions of combustion-powered cars and trucks on the roads, and that's not going to change for many years. So you would think perhaps biofuel might be a viable option, but certainly not the best solution. But it doesn't sound like that's something Volvo is really looking into, eh?
Yeah, I think Volvo sees biofuels in particular as something that, it's nice, but when you actually start to do all the math around the sustainability of biofuels, especially if you're producing it from corn, for example, producing ethanol from corn, the energy that it takes to produce that corn it more than makes up for whatever you might save in vehicle use. And also water use for the corn. So it's not actually in the end really that much. It's not really very beneficial for sustainability.
Exactly. Making that fuel out of corn never seemed like a good idea. The dream was, of course, the cellulosic ethanol, which we talked about 20 years ago or so.
Yeah, if you could use some of the waste materials, like the corn stalks, for example, that would otherwise, and even that is not entirely waste material. A lot of that stuff gets composted and gets,
or animal
put back
feed
into the fields anyway, or animal feed. So, in the end result of biofuels is not necessarily that beneficial.
Yeah, too bad. They could be a great solution, but when you do the math, maybe not in the real world. But anyway, great discussion. Always a pleasure to see you, Sam. Thanks again for your time today.
And it's always great to talk to you too, Craig. And that was a great conversation with Vanessa.
It was a really good one. But anyway, with that, of course, thank you all so much for watching GreenCars, the podcast, right here on YouTube, though the audio version of this show is available from all of your favorite podcast providers. But next, click the link right on the screen now to check out another awesome GreenCars video, and do consider subscribing to the channel for more great content just like this.